Well, the ACC and the Big 12 don't want to just roll over, give the Big 10, SEC everything they want, and they'll do it, of course, at the expense of somebody else.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, and thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. I saw Oklahoma on a list that they just shouldn't have been on and should not be on until proven otherwise. And an idea for fixing NIL all on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So, these 16-team proposals make my skin crawl, hair stand up on end, cringe. Every bad reaction you can have to something, I have them in response to the idea of a 16-team playoff, but it's going to arrive. And something that gets left out of this discussion that I didn't think about until I thought about it even more after discussing this on Friday is that the Big 12 and the ACC are, of course, trying to get themselves more automatic bids. If the Big 10 and SEC get 4, we should each get 3. And I saw one proposal, I think it was forwarded by the ACC, or discussion of an idea where they get 3 and the Big 12 only gets 2. I don't think Brett Yormark is going to go for that. But here's a suggestion that everybody should ponder when thinking about these things. Who comes out of all of this change in the worst possible position? If you go to what the Big 12 and ACC are going to continue to try to push for, and Ross Dellenger of Yahoo Sports said the discussions have been ongoing, who comes out in the worst spot if you have a 4-4-3-3-1 playoff automatic distribution model? Who's really screwed there? 4 in the Big 10, 4 in the SEC, 3 from the ACC, 3 from the Big 12. That's 14. 1 at-large spot. Notre Dame's spot, basically. They get their... Notre Dame's just special. That's how they are, of course. But yes. The Group of 5. The Group of 5 are not currently looking like they're going to have a huge say in what goes on here. There are 10 FBS conferences. In theory, everybody gets to make a decision, right? Gets to have some input. But if you are a Group of 5 conference commissioner, Teresa Gold in the Pac-12, Gloria Nevarez in the Mountain West, I need to learn the name of the Sun Belt commissioner and American off the top of my head better than I do. But they don't make as many realignment moves, so their names don't pop up in my head. Anyway, if you're the commissioner in any of those conferences, you actually will want the 4-4-2-2-1 model, because then you'd have 3 at-large spots. If the Group of 5 can work their way into getting a guarantee, okay, but that wasn't mentioned in the article that I read from Ross Dellenger. It was the 1 spot for Notre Dame and then the at-large. Like, whoa. Everyone would have to compete for the at-large spot, or would the 1 be for the Group of 5? Doesn't really look that way. It's not what was mentioned. Dellenger knows his stuff. So if you remove the number of at-large spots in a 16-team playoff, if you reduce that hypothetically from 3 down to 1, it is significantly tougher for a Boise State, for a New World Pac-12 team, for a Sun Belt team, America, wherever it would come from. Going to be a lot tougher. Now, these changes, of course, would show up for 2026. The only good news that could come of this is if they enact, and this is what the indications are, if they agree to a format for 2026 that would have straight seeding, no automatic buys for conference champions, you'd get your buys and get place and all this stuff based on where you are ranked by the committee. Whereas this past year, we didn't have that, right? And I think we all agreed, yeah, this wasn't really a good situation because you had number 1 overall seed Oregon getting a bye, but then playing 6th seed at Ohio State. Meanwhile, number 5 seed Texas had a double-digit seed in Clemson at home first, and then their next game was against another would-be double-digit seed in Arizona State. So it was better to be the 5 seed and the 1 seed. That's not how you maximize the urgency on the regular season and conference championship games the way that you should. I think if you go out and ask, and I've talked to a few from time to time, a lot of Oregon fans out there, if they had a time machine, they would go back to Dan Lanning and say, hey, coach, go out and lose that Big Ten championship game. Get the home playoff game and be on the other side of the bracket from Ohio State. Now, that's, of course, after the fact and such, but that discussion was also had amongst those fans in Eugene and everywhere else Oregon fans are all across the country going into that Big Ten championship game. Does Oregon want to win? And guess what? I thought they wanted to. And now I look at it and go, yeah, no, they would have been better off losing. That's never a situation you want to be in ever again. So straight line seating, I know that people get upset or wary about, oh, well, then you're putting all this power in the hands of the committee. Yeah, it's college football. There's going to be a committee. Things are going to be subjective. And you know what? I think they should be. I was having a comments discussion with somebody the other day who was saying preseason rankings are dumb. Not the first time I've come across somebody with that opinion. I'm one of those people who likes them. I think they are good. And yeah, I think they're wrong sometimes. I'm about to talk about a preseason top 25, not official just yet, later on today's show. And you will hear my disagreements about how those things get assessed. It doesn't mean I think you should get rid of them. It just means I think you should do it correctly, that you should do it better than you have previously in the past. So all of these discussions, if the Big 12 or the ACC, it's unclear at this point in time. This is a continually evolving situation where everybody's going to come down and whether the Big 12 or ACC can get themselves an extra bid. Because the Big 10 said, hey, you should get half as many bids as us. And they said, how about 75% at least? Because you're ahead of us. But, I wonder if Brett Yormark has thrown out the part where the SEC runners-up, Texas, should have I'll say could have, because there were a lot of close plays in that game, but there was a controversial call. There was a 4th and 13, and Texas scraped by the Big 12 champion Arizona State, who were picked to finish last in that conference. If you're Brett Yormark, aren't you thinking about that game and going, wait a minute, you're pretending there's some huge, massive gap when your number 2 team in the conference played our conference champ, and our conference champ was literally 1 play away from winning? Kind of seems like they were blow for blow there. And, Texas just as easily could have won the SEC championship game as they, of course, wound up losing it to Georgia there. So I think the Group 5 is in a potentially tough spot. I hope they get an automatic bid. If we're giving out, I don't support automatic bids for anybody, just to be clear. I don't think any conference in the country should have automatic bids. I would go to a 6-team playoff, and I would like to sit there and decide, based on the college football I've watched and who compiles their resumes, who gets into the playoff. That's what I want to do. But I don't get to make the rules. I just get to talk about them. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all that good stuff. I cannot believe something I read. This was a while ago. But it's time to get back to it now that the portal is kind of quieted down. Oklahoma, preseason top 25. Get out of here, man. First, this episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. All-in-one convenience is what they are all about. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. We're all control freaks at some level, and that should be the case when it comes to your finances. Use that code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, Locked On College for half off your first year. Check them out at monarchmoney.com. So it is way too early season of sorts. The post-spring edition of way too early lists are all floating out there. And I was reading Mark Schlabach's of ESPN, I think that's how you pronounce his name. I was reading his, because I thought he had a pretty good list going into spring ball. And then coming out of it, there was something that just made me drop my head and go, oh boy, oh no. Coming in at number 25, in the eyes of Mr. Schlabach, the Oklahoma Sooners, who previously were not ranked. Now, admittedly, they had a pretty good transfer portal cycle. They picked up perhaps the best two guys at their respective positions, quarterback and running back. When you combine the winter and spring windows, they brought in John Mateer, quarterback from Washington State. They brought in Jaden Ott, the running back from Cal. And that move getting Ott from Cal, it was pretty unexpected. I don't think a lot of people were sitting around going, oh yeah, Jaden Ott's going to I don't know why he left for his final year of college football. Except that Oklahoma's a better place to be than Cal, that's stuck in perpetual mediocrity. So the idea that the Sooners could be seen, this rings, unfortunately, bells in my head that call me back to a time where 2 years ago Tennessee was seen as good. They were not. And then last year, and frankly the year before, Missouri was viewed as good. Yeah, they were not. Remember, Oklahoma plays in the SEC. I just feel the need to remind people of that because it's weird. It's still strange. It's incredibly weird. But they're in the Southeastern Conference, which for a long time has gotten the benefit of the doubt, and justifiably so. Remember, in 2024, the SEC showcased in their non-conference results and their conference results, frankly, and the college football playoff, but only those areas, really, that they are not the SEC of old. They were not just defiantly better than everybody else in college football. So can you give me, again, I like John Mateer. I really do. He's one of my top quarterbacks that moved teams this transfer portal cycle. I think he was really good. Carson Beck was really good. I think Malik Murphy going from Duke to Oregon State was a really big pickup as well for the Beavs. But to say that Oklahoma should be viewed as a preseason top 25 team, completely and utterly ridiculous. This is a 6-7 football team last year. I know they went out and made a bunch of moves. I still don't know what their offensive line is going to be. They're relying on guys who definitely have some talent and potential, but don't have proven power for production necessarily at receiver, like Giovanni Gibson. Really talented. I haven't seen him do it in the SEC for an entire year, so I'm going to, reserve judgment there. But I think he can be good. But more than any of those position guys, who I could argue, skill position guys, we'll see how it goes in the SEC. Can we talk about John Mateer for a moment? Who I like, who is good, who I think will do well. He brings his offensive coordinator with him from Pullman, Ben Arbuckle, who was really good up there. Didn't develop a running game, by the way. Did not do it. Could not do it. I don't know if it was personnel-based or scheme-based. I think it was a combination of both. He's an air raid sort of guy. They didn't have elite offensive linemen the last couple of years up in Pullman, so they had solid but not great running backs. It just wasn't something they did very well. So it's great they bring in Jaden Ott. That's, of course, bringing in a premier player at a position that we don't know if your offensive coordinator knows how to fully utilize just yet. That's beside the point. The point I do want to make, beyond Arbuckle's ability, which I think is quite a bit, is John Mateer just had a great season. Played for 1 year at Washington State. Cam Ward, before he went to Miami, played 2 years in Pullman after coming from Incarnate Word. Mateer went to Washington State, sat for a little while behind Ward, took over the starting job, and he thrived. He could run the ball a lot. He was pushing it down the field. He was playing basically against the Mountain West. He played against other teams as well. They beat Texas Tech, who was a good team. They beat Washington, who was a bowl team in the Big Ten. Not saying Mateer hasn't showcased some things against high-level competition, but he is the way you should look at him is someone who's transferring from a Boise State, who Washington State played last year on the road and lost to, and Boise State was quite good. You wouldn't take Maddox Madsen, because he's not as physically talented of a guy, of course, Boise State's quarterback. You wouldn't take him and put him in the SEC. I don't think there's another quarterback out there. You would take Mikey Keene went from Fresno State to Michigan. Now, I think there's an injury concern that's factoring into this discussion of what I'm about to say. It looks like they're going to start Bryce Underwood, the 5-star number 1 quarterback, which I support, by the way, because I don't think Michigan's a conference title contender this year. I think they are next year, and they should have Bryce Underwood as prepared as possible to go and thrive in 2026. That's just me. That's just me. I doubt that's how Sharon Moore thinks, but at least not. It's maybe not the first thing that he thinks. But John Mateer is in himself a question mark. That could be a really good answer. You could have a great answer to that question. You could also have an answer that makes you go, yeah, this isn't working as well in the SEC. You are going to have those plays. You're going to have those plays. Those moments, sequences. You could have entire games where it's, yeah, you're not playing San Jose State. This is going to be different. Oklahoma's schedule, not a cakewalk. Not a cakewalk. Far from it, as a matter of fact. They play Michigan, speaking of the Wolverines, week 2. They've got Auburn. They've got Texas, of course, every year. They go at South Carolina. Listen to the back half of Oklahoma's schedule here. And tell me why you think this is a great situation, why Oklahoma should be a preseason top 25 team. This would be ridiculous if the AP voters put this out there. At South Carolina, host Ole Miss. At Tennessee, at Alabama, host Missouri, host LSU. Now, a reasoned response to what I just said would be, well, who they play on their schedule shouldn't affect, how we view them going into the year. Okay, so let's look at what we have to go on. A quarterback who's never played in the SEC, coming to join a team that still has question marks along the offensive line, which was a huge problem last year, that just changed offense coordinators because, well, it was really, really bad last year. And, oh, by the way, they went 6-7 and lost to Navy. Can you give me any other conference in which a team, even one with as big a brand as Oklahoma's, let's take a big brand from the bit. Let's take Miami. That's a good example. Or Florida State. Let's take Florida State. Let's say Florida State this year, coming off that 2-10 campaign, were to go 6-6, make a bowl game, and lose to Navy. Do you believe that there is a number of moves they could make in the offseason to put them in the preseason top 25? I don't think even for Florida State. I don't even think for Miami. Like, the idea that Oklahoma should be seen as 4 spots worse in Schlabach's view than Miami, who won 10 games last year and added a far more proven quarterback in Carson Beck. And he's got Miami as a preseason number 21 and Oklahoma preseason number 25. Brent Venables has had more losing seasons than winning ones in Norman so far. With the least proven quarterback he's had, the last time, by the way, he went with, a younger, talented guy. Different scenarios, to be sure. Jackson Arnold plays for Auburn now. Didn't work out the way they were hoping for. I just don't know what benefit of the doubt Brent Venables has earned in his time at Oklahoma? Where is it? Is it the consistency on defense? Yeah, okay, they've gotten better. The first year was a disaster, but certainly it got better. But when you haven't been able to figure out the quarterback situation like last year with Dylan Gabriel, they went 10-2. Gabriel leaves, it was a mess. All right, so you make a change of offensive coordinator, and you're banking on a couple guys that just had a good year, mostly against the Mountain West, and now you're going to try that against the SEC. Red flag right here. Oklahoma preseason top 25. I have got no confidence that they are deserving of that particular metric. That is not how I would see them. They got plenty of talent on the roster. Peyton Bowen's a really good player. At safety was a big-time recruit. They've got Deion Burks back, former Purdue transfer. Williams, the nose tackle, is really good. Like, they've got some talent. They could be fine. Preseason top 25? No, I could find 25 teams I would rank ahead of Oklahoma going into the year. They'll have a chance to prove it. I don't think they'll prove Schlabach right there. So I thought that was surprising, and thus I'm calling it out here on the show because that's how this works. Do you like NIL? I have like a neutral-ish opinion on it. One of you has a solution that is kind of a solution. So, I'm sure we all have our own ideas about what NIL is or should be or can be or how it should work and whatnot. Kyler sent in this proposal. I found it very interesting. 5 tiers of salary you can earn. These are rough numbers that may not be the best, but for example, tier 1, a player would be worth $250,000, tier 4, $200,000, tier 3, $150,000, and so forth, with incentives based on performance for each of those tiers. So I get where you're coming from, Kyler. I don't know that this necessarily fixes anything, that a player would be designated. The biggest obstacle you would face here, this requires, I think, pretty massive collective bargaining. If you were going to have design structures about, a school's ability to evaluate a player and say, we think you are tier 2, we're going to pay you that way, here are the incentives in your contract, you have to get agents more involved, licensed agents more involved, which, the NIL space could use, frankly, anyway. The problem, though, you run into is if you're going to give, this would be, I think at some level, a little bit more of a power pendulum swing back to the schools, which I think is going to happen at some point because the pendulum has swung too far the other way towards the players right now, and that's creating a lot of issues, and it needs to settle on an equilibrium. You think of a grandfather clock, it's going back and forth. It needs to just come to rest and just be straight vertical up and down. So this idea of kind of segmenting it out, of parsing it like you're a tier 1 player for this, the first hurdle you run into is, I don't know that the players would agree to that, to allow the schools to limit their value. That's the first thing. The second thing, and this has been discussed in a couple of different court cases with regards to NIL, is there appears to be no legal mechanism, barring potentially pending legislation from the federal level. There is no legal route, it seems, for the NCAA or for universities or the playoff committee or whoever to cap the earning potential of college football players. If you don't think that's good for the sport, I'm not going to sit here and argue with you, because I do think that we have, a maximum, it goes up and such in the NFL, the salary cap and all that sort of stuff, but it exists in the NFL for a reason, to maintain competitive balance. And even with regards to the House settlement, which is, this big revenue sharing distribution that is coming down the pipeline very, very soon. It's like kind of already here, but not all the way here. Essentially, schools can just directly pay players. There have already, I've read multiple articles where people discuss the idea that Yeah, not sure the NCAA can set a salary cap there. Like, the number that's been tossed around is, well, there will be a $20.5 million payroll, and no one can go above that. And I think the lawyers can get down to, the details of everything and go, yeah, you can't enforce that. You can't tell them they can't if they move into a contractual relationship with a school and an NIL collective, respectively, you can't cap what they earn because there is no overarching structure or rules or guidelines for any of this sort of stuff. So when you hear about, vaguely, NIL is rolled out quickly and haphazardly and it's a mess, it's chaotic. This is what they're talking about, is that they don't have a way to enforce the rules at the moment. And every single time the NCAA has been taken to court over this stuff or their authority on college sports, they are losing consistently. So I think where this is heading is towards federal legislation. And there has been a commission or a committee ordered to try and figure out, that Nick Saban and Cody Campbell, the NIL director at Texas Tech, were going to be a part of. I don't know if that's still happening, but they were going to be a part of a group that would explore how college football can fix all these problems and find solutions to this sort of stuff. In the meantime, though, it's as wild as it can be. If you read any article from a major reporter that talks about this stuff, what they will tell you or, communicate with the words that they're writing on your screen is, yeah, everyone's in a full-throated attack mode right now because eventually legislation could show up so that they could cap this sort of stuff, which I do think could be good for the sport if done correctly. But right now, you can just do whatever you want for as much money as you want, and you can structure it however you would like. It turns out that has some consequences. So back to your idea, Kyler. I get where your head is at. I just think that players are not going to support being categorized that way. And I don't know if NIL deals with collectives have contract incentives the way that professional contracts do. I think it could make perfect sense. It's not always the best thing because, the relationships between parents and coaches exists, whereas in the NFL it doesn't, and that can make things get sticky and messy, and I don't think coaches would like that a lot. But if it's between the player and the collective, which is separate from the school, what the heck is the coach going to do? Exactly. I mean, pick up the phone, call the leader of the collective and say, yeah, we don't want you to do that. Please don't make this a thing. I don't know. I don't know. I get where you're coming from, Kyler. I don't think that proposal would get anywhere close to being implemented. I think eventually there's going to be federal legislation on the matter. Whether or not we like it, we'll just have to wait and see. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.